In Native cultures, identity and sovereignty are embedded in land. Despite great diversity between Native North American cultures, one commonly held belief between the hundreds of distinct peoples is that land is sacred. Many tribes view their cosmologies and religious lives as intimately tied to their ancestral homelands. In fact, many Native elders say that every part of daily life is spiritual, that a life lived on the land is itself a religious activity, the whole of living a religious phenomenon. Legal and religious scholar Dana Lloyd writes that treating some aspects of local Native lives as secular and others as religious is a colonial practice that results in forcing a non-Western practice into a Western category. Indeed, for many Native peoples, ceremony and ritual are integrated parts of daily life. Embedded within everyday routines is a lived sense of reverence for the spiritual value of land, water, and other living beings. Plants and animals are not viewed as resources. They are family, relatives. Native rituals are often centered on sustaining relationships with non-human relatives and maintaining balance in the universe. Land is the source of life, the center of everything.
We are Buffalo people.
For Lakota people specifically, the Black Hills is a place of emergence. Not just the physical creation of life itself, but the emergence of ourselves as a nation, especially in relation to the United States government.
The Black Hills represents our Mecca. This is the most sacred place in the world. How do you say it? I can't even express it. I can believe it, think it, feel it. It's in my spirit. But how do you put that even into English? The land and the people, Oyate, are inextricably connected.
For Native peoples, creation stories are not just about the past. They are also about understanding one's rightful place in the world, where one belongs, the knowledge and wisdom one's ancestors have gained and passed on, and how to live in an appropriate way. Prior to contact with Europeans, Native peoples' spiritual lives had so often been rooted to place. The mountains they looked up to, the rivers they drank from, the buffalo they hunted, the medicines they harvested from the local landscape. For example, the religious practice of the Yurok Nation in the Pacific Northwest centers on world renewal. This type of religious participation seeks not for personal salvation, but to renew the natural processes of the earth. The aims of their practices are to stabilize and preserve their environment and the health of their human and animal kin. In this way, the Yurok's ongoing efforts to regain rights, to steward the Klamath River, save it from destruction, undo the harm done by the placement of dams, and return the salmon, are central to their religious ceremonies. For the Yurok, storytelling, law, and religion are not separate, but interrelated. Their religious beliefs give structure to their moral frameworks, and their morality constitutes law. Stories, in turn, help to carry forward these values and teach guidelines for living to the next generations. Land and water lie at the heart of the Yurok's religious and spiritual practice. Unlike Christian beliefs, which begin with the individual and extend to God, Yurok people describe their religious system as one that begins fundamentally with community and extends the community's relationship to the natural world. European colonization of North America brought staggering dislocation and loss of land for Native American peoples. Accompanying that was unspeakable distress and religious disruption. But Native peoples have found strength in their spiritual practices. World renewal ceremonies do more than just ensure continuous relationship with the land. They also create spiritual bonds that hold tribal people together. Protest movements to regain land and sovereignty are places for tribal unity to be built.
Things changed. They made sense after I was here. They made sense. All the things that when you're talked to and you don't listen and you hear, your spirit listens. And when you get more connected to ceremony, and part of that ceremony, you start to really figure that out. I know almost dying, a few years ago, opened my eyes onto why I had to come home. What I thought was a good life at that time, teaching was. But as I start to find myself looking back and then looking forward, and I'm supposed to be here.
In the 1970s, the American Indian movement sought to draw the attention of everyday Americans to the continued dispossession of Native people through several occupations. With spirituality and land claims at the center of their movement, a new wave of Native activism was born.
The Indian movement was different than other political movements of the time because it defined itself as a spiritual movement. Their trajectory, in a way, mirrors what a lot of the Indian world was about, which was trying to connect with traditional knowledge, culture, religion.
The most famous of these occupations was at Wounded Knee, South Dakota, in 1973, where over 250 Lakota men, women, and children had been slaughtered by the U.S. military some 80 years earlier. Leading up to the massacre was a familiar combination of Indian land seizure by the U.S., Native resistance, and crackdowns on Native religious practices like the ghost dance. The ghost dance had sought to renew Indian peoples and to restore the land to how it had been before colonization.
We were about to be obliterated culturally. Our spiritual way of life, our entire way of life was about to be stamped out. And this was a rebirth of our dignity and self-pride.
For many Native communities, true unbounded sovereignty over their land is connected with the fight to regain religious freedom. The criminalization of Native spiritual practices by the U.S. government proliferated in the late 19th century and into the 20th century, limiting communities from engaging in all types of sacred practices, like the sun dance. In Native frameworks, nothing can be taken without a cost to relatives, whether that be a buffalo hunted, a berry picked, or a tree made into a canoe. Violence cannot be done without acts of reciprocation. So something is always given back. Respect is shown. Prayers and offerings are made. And with these ongoing reciprocal relationships, the balance of existence can be maintained. Oftentimes, for Native peoples, this meant forms of ritual suffering, which showed care and concern for the lives that were taken to sustain Native peoples. Land and autonomy also mean religious freedom, because together they grant a place to practice rituals, and they grant the right to practice in peace, free from the threat of legal punishment.
I didn't grow up having the freedom to worship. In 1978 was the first legal Sundance. After 60 years, after 3 generations of people, we were allowed to be the only people in the country that needed an act of Congress to grant us freedom of religion. I lived on the river all my life, before and after they removed me. So you go back. And as long as we have the collective memory of that connection, we'll go back. And we'll understand what's there for us.
The Landback movement has grown to be more than an Indigenous-led protest movement. It is a new avenue for spiritual engagement, for the reclamation of land-based practices, for sustaining the kinship obligations central to Native lifeways. In protest and on the front lines, communities come together to revitalize their spiritual practices and to sustain their ancestors' ways. In these highly modernized contexts, where environment and structures of society are radically different from pre-context times, Native people have adapted what it means to practice their spirituality. Drumming and ceremony at protest camps show Native children and non-Native allies alike what prayerful resistance can look like. Teaching non-Native allies how to act with respect, how to care for the natural world, and to be part of Native resistance has also become a form of ceremony.
In the beginning, my job was to educate and empower and teach our non-Native relatives digital protocol, when and when not to film the children, not the permission of the parents, not to film ceremony. Those times are sacred. And also to participate in the ceremony before you film. Connect your spirit so you know why you're there. Educate and empower yourself. To learn about us, to learn about yourself, to learn why we are all there together, why your spirit drew you there. That was important to share.
Whether in the ongoing fight for the Black Hills, or the historic pan-tribal effort to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline, standing against extractive industry and the destruction of land has become an act of ceremony. Advocating for responsible land stewardship, for environmental sensibility, for people to see water, land, salmon, and deer as sacred, has become an ever-growing piece of contemporary Native religious practice.
I'm tired of the heartache. I'm ready to hold my heart out and to be strong. And so that's what I'm showing my daughters when I'm standing out there. When I'm standing on those front lines, when I'm marching. I am protecting our sacred ways of living. I am empowering that intention of healing from this historical trauma. We're not going anywhere. This is our ancestral land, and we'll continue fighting for it by all means.
It's not always one spectacular resistance or a battle or the defeat of Custer, right? Resistance movements really bring together spaces for us to remake ourselves and for us to be Lakota, for us to be Dakota.
None of us achieve liberation without each other. we can work towards Indigenous land back and Black reparations. This is not an either-or situation, and we do not live in a world of scarcity. To be honest, I don't want to achieve my liberation and my sovereignty unless I bring my relatives with me.
Andy Lyons, Crystal T. Williams, director of the Landback campaign. Myself and a crew of 4 Indigenous climbers just now completed climbing over 100 feet on the side of the Dakota Mill silo. All of this land is Indigenous land.
Landback is a war cry for the liberation of my people. And I believe that. Down to my heart, I pray on that. I live my life for that. I sacrifice for that.
What I like to tell people is we're still here. You know, as Oglala Lakota people, we're the last of the fighters. We held on so hard for so long, and we continue to hold on.
Well, step out of line. Don't be waiting when you know deep within your spirit that is the right direction to go.
The issues of dispossession, pollution, and extractive industry can significantly alter Native youth's sense of belonging and safety in a place, in their home. But Native people's imperative to protect the land comes from deeply held values of kinship that have not changed over time. Land repatriation is deeply connected with religious life for contemporary Native communities. Ojibwe, Dakota, and Lakota scholar Kyle Hill writes, "Movements are led with prayer and spirituality, recognizing the spirits and interconnectedness of the land, waters, animals, and other non-human relatives. Indigenous communities continue to live according to ancestral knowledge systems that govern a spiritual kinship to the land. The prophecy of the 7th generation recognizes Indigenous youth as the keepers of collective survival, resilience, and continuity of Indigenous community health, land stewardship, and traditional ecological knowledge. These values are what guided the resistance during the 2016 Dakota Access Pipeline protests at Standing Rock, North Dakota. Mini Wichoni, water is life, and protect the sacred were 2 central taglines of the movement that are just as relevant today. Mini Wichoni is a Lakota spiritual philosophy that acknowledges, as Kyle Hill writes, the power and importance of water as kin and source of spirituality, as a life-giving force to Indigenous communities and a sovereign being with a right to life.
We know for a fact that when Indigenous peoples are back in relationship with our lands and back into managing our own lands, that it benefits all peoples. So us fighting for clean water is not just so we have clean water on the reservation. It's so that there's clean water all downstream and for all living beings.
The ways Native people approach land activism, their language, the imagery, the dreams they speak of living out on the land, all reveal deeply held sentiments about the role of land in Native spiritual well-being. Kyle Hill writes that power is manifest in all things. Sacred experiences are not confined to the church. They occur on the land, in the waters, in connection with the cycles of nature and with the movements of other beings. This is why recognition and monetary compensation can never be enough. Native people want their land back, and their drive to fight for it is rooted in a deep-seated desire to rekindle their spiritual connection to the earth.
It's not just a monetary question. It's not a land question. It's none of these. We are fighting for the integrity of our people.
So we said we don't want the money.
The Supreme Court of the United States has already ruled that they should be awarded the money, but the Sioux don't want it. They want their sacred land.
I've been here for the past 27 years now, been home. And when I hear people talking about the Black Hills, they still stand their ground. The Black Hills are never for sale.
Despite all that has changed in the last 400 years, Native peoples have carried their beliefs to the present day, and their spiritual connection to the ground beneath us and all its inhabitants has much to teach the world about reciprocity, responsibility, and care. For land-based peoples to recover physically, emotionally, and spiritually from the violence, broken treaties, forced removals, and biological warfare they endured, rebuilding relationships with place must be a first step. For land-based peoples, this means regaining access to their ancestral homelands.
We have to move beyond the realm of representation and recognition. You can recognize that you did harm in this way, but does that make Flint's water clean and drinkable? No, you actually have to have a material transformation.
Landback is a reparations framework, and it's about repair. At the heart of reparations is repair. We want everybody beyond Indigenous spaces, beyond just organizing and movement spaces, but general public to be talking about Landback and to be talking about it in a way where there's no fear attached to it, but there's a sense of justice.
Your voice is power. Your body is power. Be proud to be Lakota. Be proud of where you come from.
This country has only gotten better when people resisted the powers that be. Our work here is about not just reclaiming land, but reclaiming power. I'm fighting for prosperity. Our goal is not to just go back and live in teepees. I grew up listening to Tupac. It's about building a future that this next generation can see themselves in. I think the best days of my people are in front of me. I think the best days of the Lakota are in front of us and not behind us.
The Lakota people have an understanding that their lives on the plains and near the Black Hills put them into relationship with that place, and that they carry an enduring spiritual responsibility to care for it. The denial of those relationships, whether the Lakota from the Black Hills, the Yurok people from the Klamath River, or countless tribes from their ancestral forests, deserts, and landscapes, is a continuation of cultural destruction and religious oppression. But the Landback movement is showing that even in separation from their sacred places, Native people are using prayer and ceremony as tools in the long fight to come back home.